Brilliant. So in the absence of Scott, does anybody want to volunteer as moderator? I guess I opened my mouth first, so that's I volunteered by default, didn't I? Okay, yeah, no worries. So I think the agenda for today is, so firstly, for those of you watching this in the future, welcome to the GitOps Principals Committee meeting on the Wednesday, 19th of May, 2021. Today, the agenda is to review the status of the PR for the principles, the initial principles document, and is there any other agenda from a topic from the people here? No, okay. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll share my screen. I'll show the PR and we can have a discussion about the PR. Cool. So if I go to, I believe it's Open GitOps documents, and it's the only pull request here. Right, so Scott opened this a week ago, just before the previous meeting. I took a look at this earlier and couldn't approve it. I don't think, I don't know why, but I wasn't able to approve that. But I think some of us have approved it, if I'm not mistaken. But there's been fairly active discussion. Yeah, so on the PR, does anybody want to get us started about discussing this?
Just a question, are all the, we had a couple of updates. I think all those have been resolved, right?
Updates to the principles or the author list, you mean?
No, I mean the principles document, the principles and the updates that Moshe did. I think is everything resolved now, right?
I missed the last thing, so
sorry.
Please jump in.
Yeah, I just mean like everything that's been open on this pull request have been resolved, right? There's nothing left to take any decisions in regards of. I'm redecorating, so I'm really tired.
There's
it doesn't look like there's anything there, right?
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any more pending. I think all the comments that were brought up were resolved. Yeah.
So who would be able to merge this then? Who, I think Cornelia, you may have the ability to merge this pull request.
I think it's Scott and Leo, and I'm not sure. Those are the only people that are public members of Open GitOps. So I wouldn't know who else.
I can take a look. So I'm going to try approving.
If I'm blowing up formality here, forgive me. Just for the folks that weren't on last week's meeting, the idea here is to get the 4 principles in writing and then iterate. And I think that's really the quorum that we arrived at. So this is really first step. So looking at it, we have the notes. The notes aren't permanent. the glossary is probably going to be in its own document, but that's the idea here. And I think that yes, merging is the right next step.
I see that Cornelia updated. And I guess there's only one review that's needed. So it looks all green.
Yeah, I think it just needs to be merged with somebody with the right access to the repository. I can take an action to chase this up outside of this meeting to try and get it merged before the next one. So the question becomes really, no, I'll write this down in the minutes.
Yeah, this looks mergeable now.
Okay, so if we have a mergeable PR, we can chase getting that merged in until between this meeting and the next. Any other topic anybody else would like to add to the agenda for today? As I mentioned, I wasn't there last week, so I'm not quite sure what was planned in advance.
Yeah, I don't have the link for it. Hold on, in order to add it. But my meeting agenda, there it is. Sorry, I'm looking at the calendar invite. One thing I do want to discuss is, like, now that we have this merged, what are the next steps, I guess? Like, where do we go from here now? I guess would be the next topic of discussion. It would be nice to at least have the discussion, right? Like, where, because I know merging we open it up now to everyone else for feedback. When do we, like, what's the next steps, right? What do we envision? So action topics. Thank you, Brees. I see you writing that down.
So I mean, a question was, what are we doing about explanatory notes? So I believe that last time, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about additional notes. I took an action away to write some of those. I have not managed to complete that yet, but that is still on my to-do list, and I still intend to get round to that. Do we have any more people who'd like to provide an additional note? I believe that Moshe had a note to provide on kind of details about reconciliation loops, and in particular open and closed systems, open and closed loops when it comes to state reconciliation, and I thought that would be a good addition. Do we have any additional notes that we want to go through? Any additions to these principles that we want to?
I remember we discussed a couple of weeks ago something like a poster. That could be one of the next steps.
Yeah, so I agree. I think that people have, remember that the GitOps working group is about education and about helping people kind of embrace and adopt. And so I absolutely feel like writing down the principles is only step one, and we now have to help people understand them. And that's going to come through a number of different, it's going to come through repetition, it's going to come through examples, it's going to come through a whole bunch of things. So I think poster, so like an infographic or something like that. I also think an interactive, like a video presentation of that poster, maybe in, a build, an animation that builds it out and tells about each of the principles and the values against those. And so then it also led me to think, okay, well, what's up with the website team? So some of these assets that we're talking about building, we have to have a place to put them. I don't want to just stick them in a Git repository. We're talking about a bit of a marketing exercise around this.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think that's an excellent point, Cornelia. Is that, like, okay, now that we have them, having them in a Git repo, that's the it's you use an interesting word like sticking them in it. It's almost like you're sticking in a drawer and forgetting about them. I think maybe some of the next steps in terms of is definitely marketing these things and evangelizing it, in terms of like, here they are, and come learn about it and come to the group. I think that's an excellent point. So plus oneing that, definitely.
Could we possibly have a type of slide deck, like done presentation, or at least something to start off with? I'm probably going to do a GitOps talk internally at Crayon very soon, and having those kind of things ready to go, so I can just talk about it, not having to prepare a lot. That would be good.
So Chris Sanders and I did a presentation at KubeCon. So we should, I would be more than happy to put it's a Google slide. So do we have a place? Oh, I guess we do. We have a place I can upload those slides into our drive. Is this drive a CNCF drive? Do we have a folder?
I believe that's been set up as part of the project. I don't have the details. So Scott and yourself, I think, had access to the CNCF org around this. But in the meantime, if there's a simple way of sharing things, any kind of publicly hosted documents, I think, would work.
Yeah, I mean, I can always create a PDF. It may not be a bad idea to create a PDF of what we did and stick it in the GitHub repository somewhere.
Yep, that sounds good.
With maybe a link to once it gets posted on YouTube. I don't know if they've posted all of the KubeCon talks yet, but we can certainly link to the presentation. But then for people like you, Robert, who want to do a presentation, you may not want to use exactly those slides. It has CNCF branding on it, et cetera, et cetera. But it would be good for you to have the source, not just a PDF, so that you can leverage those things.
I've got to say, I really like the idea of a GitOps media kit. That's make sure everything is on brand, make sure the principles and the practices are represented accurately. And I mean, we have a logo, so some guidelines around how to use the logo, when to use it, and when it's not appropriate to use it. Sounds quite sensible as an overall thing. Do we have so what do we think are the best next steps then to make this happen? Should somebody take an action away? Should we schedule pairing sessions to kind of do some of these actions? What would be the best way of making those things happen?
I could take an AI on connecting with the website team, because I think I'm on it. So I can just ping Dan. I think he might have been waiting for some things to settle here, so might be time to ping them. So I can do that. One thing, not to rewind, but sorry, I got a little distracted here with something. So another next step outside of this, but kind of up in the upper section, we had talked about teasing some of the narrative out of what was removed to just arrive at the principles. So I think Scott and I were talking about maybe getting together and just trying to put a narrative together to accompany the principles, which is based on a lot of what you had written, Brees, and others. That was from last week. So that's an AI that we can carry forward as well.
So would you could you give me more details about what that would be? So this would be what, writing the explanatory note, or adding context, adding a history section?
No, more context and narrative support of the principles.
Okay.
Probably in its own markdown. Which I think can inform the website efforts and the media kit. I think I think we've arrived at a lot of really good shared terminology that we just want to put somewhere.
Yep. What I will say is that there is a soon to be a podcast where some of us are going to be talking about this exactly. For some reason, I can't type anymore. But one thing that could work quite well would be to use the recording and have that transcribed and then use that as the basis for the materials, because I think we're going to talk about the context and the story. That's already something we've planned on talking about during the time. What's the opinion on that? I think that might be, we can send that off to be transcribed very quickly, and that can form the basis of a document that we can use as an initial draft. Getting a thumbs up from
Yeah.
Robert.
No. Yeah, I got a thumbs up here. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Okay, so I'm happy to take this on to grab the that after the podcast, grab the recording. So I can do that after our podcast. Cornelia, you're hosting. Is there anything else that might be worth mentioning about that?
No, I think no, I think you said it all.
Okay. Great. So are we happy about, some of the, we're going to cover some ground around the context and the story of GitOps literally in 2 days, so on Friday, and hopefully that will turn into a useful document. Are there any additional notes, any additional kind of information documents that we want to produce to form kind of the basis of GitOps going forward that have been mentioned but not captured here? So I for example, these are only two. I also know that we've talked about breaking glass. So when to break the glass on GitOps. And for the sake of the recording, and for people who might not be familiar, this is the idea that under what emergency conditions can we not act in accordance to the principles, and what are kind of the best practices around that. There was some mention of immediacy and distributed system.
Yeah, this is almost like you're writing exceptions, right? Like you have like the principles, and then like when, I guess I don't like the word exceptions, so I do like break the glass, like when to break the glass. Maybe keep that verbiage, but it's almost like you're writing those, like when don't I GitOps in a GitOps workflow.
Yeah, and a really clear one is the bootstrapping process. So it's you can't create a GitOps system without having some software operating already, and obviously that software can't be installed via GitOps because you don't have a GitOps system yet. So the question becomes, how do you bootstrap a GitOps system, and what's the lowest level? So I think we had a plan to write up some notes on bootstrapping, and kind of where to draw that line and why, and how much of a concern that should be on a pragmatic level. So those are some of the additional notes that are worth going into. Anything else we want to capture at this time?
We want to talk about adoption planning and the maturity models, or do we want to defer? Yes? I like
Yes.
that. Okay, good.
So I think adoption path and maturity model for GitOps are both things that are going to be very useful, especially for communicating GitOps and getting GitOps adopted. So I think those are fairly big things. So some of the other ones are just quite quick notes, maybe a few paragraphs, but I think an adoption path and a maturity model are slightly more complex. But yes, I think those are absolutely worthwhile. I would second that. Okay, so we have cleared so some kind of additional notes to write. We have a set of things to do around the media kit. I think this is essentially, this will be captured by getting the recording transcribed. But we don't really have, and there are some outstanding action items around the additional notes. So is there anything else that we want to take away and do and before the next meeting? So I know, for example, I should be writing, I believe, Git as a state store and when to break the glass on GitOps. Those are two of my takeaway items from the last time we met. Anything else that we want to take on, especially around the assets?
So I want to come back to, and I know that somebody took the action item, Jesse took the action item to talk to Dan about website. So I'm kind of thinking like the website should have a blog.
Yep.
And so all of these assets that we're talking about feel like just like a regular cadence of blog posts. And then it feels like as the industry, as you know, we have these various events and people ask these questions about how should I structure my repositories? Should I have multiple repositories, et cetera, et cetera? That's where we can continue. So there's always this tension of, are these blog posts or are these assets that we put in a GitHub repository? And I guess it depends. It depends on if it's just if it's a narrative or if it's a narrative that comes with sample code or something like that. But I'm feeling like a lot of these topics are like blog topics, like Open GitOps blog topics.
I would second that, the idea of having those as blog topics, and we can invite contributors about specific topics. That sounds like a perfect match. So yeah, that sounds perfect. So we'll need to work with the website team to get that up and running. Can anybody give us a quick summary of the state of the website at this time?
I don't know if they've been meeting or not. The Slack channel doesn't have any traffic really. So I just pinged Dan, so I can take that. I can talk about the blog there too and just see if we can get things spun up, or get an idea of if they already spun up.
Yeah, I mean, by default, a really cheap and easy way of doing that would be to set up a repository under the Open GitOps organization, and then go ahead and create a GitHub pages. I believe we can set up custom domains, so that's a next level up discussion. But there's a question about having the Open GitOps domain. So if we could point the Open GitOps domain to GitHub pages, and we can get the TLS certificate set up, that would probably be good enough to start with, I feel. And we already had some quite awesome design input for logo design and stuff. So I'm sure we'd get community contribution to make the website very attractive and effective. So if we got that started, I think we could iterate on that quite well. But I defer to the website team on that, obviously. So I think writing those topics, whether we end up as blog or documents in GitHub, I think that can get started. What about the poster and infographics? Is that something we want to start taking a look at? And does anybody want to actually? I mean, you mentioned, Cornelia, that you'd be making your you're making your presentation available to the GitOps working group. Anything else that we want to take on for the poster and the infographics?
So the other thing that I'll offer up, and I can't, please forgive me if I've told you all this already, but I don't think all of you have heard this. So one of the communities that I'm super involved in is the Devops Enterprise community. So this is Gene Kim's community. And we had an event about a month ago, which happens once a year, where a whole bunch of DevOps peeps get together, about 50 of us get together, and for 3 days of sharing and working. And we build white papers. And this year I brought a topic, which is, I provocatively titled it, "Does GitOps replace DevOps?" Knowing full well the answer is no. But we had a team of about 4 of us who worked on that topic for 2 days, and we are publishing a white paper on that. It'll be an IT Rev white paper. And we did on the last day, we do a readout of, you know, what we've done so far, and the goal is teach everyone something. And so we did like a 10-minute, you know, blurb on what is GitOps. And it's not exactly the way that we've crafted the principles here, but it's something that we could use as a starting point. The other thing that I'll mention is that the team, the DevOps community liked the presentation so much, they all recommended that we not wait for the white paper to be published. And so we have created a blog post, and IT Rev is going to be publishing that blog post next week. And so there's a few assets there that we can bring in. I recommend that we, you know, make them Open GitOps branded, but there's like the presentation, and in fact I used part of that in the KubeCon presentation. So there's some assets there that we can use to maybe spur some of that. I do think that maybe we can find in the community somebody who's good at doing infographics, kind of a designer kind of a person. And the way that I've seen infographics done really well is when the propeller heads like us, you know, give our pitch, and somebody who's really good at capturing that in poster form can draw out what is in our heads. So I wonder if we can find somebody in one of our respective organizations even. I'm looking at you, Jesse. Amazon has lots of really amazing infographics.
Yeah, I actually just sent a note to somebody. So yeah,
Awesome.
Well, I'll see if I can find somebody. I've seen some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
So.
And then we can give our pitches, and they can probe questions, and yeah, that would be super cool.
That sounds excellent. I'm kind of looking forward to see what will come out of that. So is there anything else we want to cover today? So we have quite a few actions to take away. We'll get some assets generated from the upcoming podcast, which should be pretty kind of low effort requirement from us to kind of start generating some initial assets. Any other topics or anything else we want to talk about for these two, for the additional notes and the poster?
I wonder about breaking the glass. Does that cover out of scope as well? So what I understood from your comment, Bryce, breaking the glass is when you intentionally go out of GitOps in order to achieve GitOps.
I think so. The way it's been used in previous discussion is how do you deal with situations where you have a strict requirement that would mean that you break one of the GitOps principle, and that could be a legislative requirements. That could be, for example, one great example is if you end up with personally identifiable information in your state store, right, and you have a request to delete that information. How do you deal with it, right? The GitOps principle states that should be immutable, and yet you have a legal requirement to remove it. So I think in that case, most people would pragmatically say, well, let's just remove it manually. Let's have an exception to the standard process. But there are kind of other situations where that might be the case.
Okay.
One of them is responding to an incident.
Okay. Then I propose we'll have an additional point to additional notes, which is out of scope, because to me, the principles define like the gist of what GitOps is. And this defines what is in scope. And to better describe what is in scope, out of scope often helps with examples, for example.
Yeah, so the initial work Scott and I ended up doing had a quite lengthy section about the scope of GitOps and what it should and shouldn't be applied to, but that we kind of distilled that out when we got to the 4 principles. But I think that having a discussion about the scope of GitOps would be really useful.
If you could share those notes that you and the work that you did already, I would take on an action item to propose something for out of scope.
Yeah,
I don't. Yeah.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other topic then before we close? I think we've exhausted those 2 topics and we've got clear actions to take, and hopefully by the time we come back to the next meeting, we'll have quite a few documents to review together as a group, and hopefully a clear idea of whether we can start contributing to an Open GitOps blog, and if not, and maybe the website team needs a little bit of help, we can provide some of that as well to start making those things publicly available in a kind of user-friendly format. Any other topic before we move on to planning the next meeting? Okay, that seems like a no. So in which case we have a regular meeting. So the next time we meet should be the 26th, I believe, 26th of May.
Yep.
Would anyone like to volunteer for moderator?
If Scott isn't here, I can do it.
Okay.
Or I can take notes, one or the other.
Yep. And anything we want to explicitly address for the agenda for the next meeting, I think so. So I think review website status, see how to make principles available on the website.
I think we'll need the narrative for that too, the supporting narrative, I think.
So maybe simply take a look at the website status and review the documents that have been generated in the interval.
Yeah, and also if there's going to be PRs to the notes, right, we're going to have to review the PR, right, for the notes. I mean, we can do that asynchronously as well, but we can talk about, there would be a point of discussion.
Yep. Okay, it feels like we've got concrete things to do now that the principles are kind of the draft 1 of the principles. Does this seem to everybody that this is the correct next step, or are we missing something? Are we going in the right direction?
I think this is all good stuff. The only feeling I have is that not all of this feels like principles committee scoped stuff, but I think that's okay. I think we can initiate this and get it rolling. I don't think we have to we don't have to over rotate, but I think that's just my only observation. And for folks maybe watching the video later, they might be thinking the same. So
Yeah.
Yep. That seems fair.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think all of the work in the GitOps working group has to come in a committee, has to come in a formal committee, and or maybe just using this committee to continue to advance the education around the principles seems fair enough.
Yep.
But otherwise, we could just dissolve this committee for now and say, okay, when we get a PR, then we'll come back together and talk about it.
Reconvene.
But I think the first thing to do is to say, we're not done. You know, it's kind of
Yeah, no, we
done.
definitely still have principles work to do at least.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. And so I think that the most urgent principles work is to start to get the word out. And, you know, another thing that it dawns on me is like, where are all the places that we can start to get the word out? So there's the blog, but then are there other conferences that we want to submit papers to? You know, talks to talk about what we're doing in Open GitOps and what the principles are and the value of them, and just keep evangelizing them. It's really, I feel like we're getting into an evangelism phase for a bit.
Yep, and I mean, there's going to be quite a few conferences coming up for the rest of the year that would be really highly suitable for this, both from the CNCF, the Linux Foundation, and other organizations that would, I think, benefit from us taking a look at them.
Yeah.
So maybe what we can do is have a list next time we meet, have a list of potential conferences, and take a look at doing something as Open GitOps to evangelize the principles, to kind of submit an application to upcoming conferences as the Open GitOps group, rather than as individuals, and try and represent kind of the work we've done to those various kind of channels.
Should we put a CFP in for KubeCon North America? Yeah, because we won't have, like in Sandbox, we won't have anything special. So yeah, some maybe.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually.
Yeah, should we pick that up on Slack and just have a couple of us hook up and try and put a CFP together, almost like
Great idea.
it could even be a panel of our team.
Oh, that is a great idea.
Yeah, like a principal panel or something like that for Open GitOps, or maybe something.
I wouldn't be so specific. I wouldn't say just
Doesn't
about
have to be.
principles. I would say,
Oh, just open GitOps in general
GitOps.
in the working group. And
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like an excellent idea.
Yeah, because we did a GitOps working group update at the last KubeCon. It would be super cool to broaden that and make that a panel. So it could just be Open GitOps update panel style.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so Jesse, if you could grab some people on Slack and start taking a look, that sounds excellent.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Okay. Any last topic? Then I think we've got quite a few things. Anything else we want to go through today, or should we call this meeting to a close?
I think we're good.
All right. Brilliant. So thank you all for attending, and to whoever's watching in the future, thank you for watching us talk about GitOps, and hopefully we can see you at the next GitOps working group principles committee meeting. That's a mouthful, where we'll carry on and pick some of those items up. So thank you all for coming today, and see you next time.
All right. Thanks all.
Bye.
Everybody.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.